from one section, and then you will see that how she is trying to theorize this idea of the decolonization that is becoming really contested kinds of concept, contested category with, of course, with the new kinds of political regime. And she's saying that if translation is to be decolonial practice, it also calls for us to widen the scope of what colonialism is and what it involves. Colonialism to me is not only white-skinned European hegemony. Colonialism is a subjugation and supremacy. Colonialism is the inflated superiority of claiming to be a better civilization. Colonialism is the imposition of another set of cultural values. Colonialism is the restructuring of a society based on the hierarchies prevalent in the colonizers' own. In this context, colonization to me, for Meena, is the inroads made by the patriarchal caste system into Tamil culture and society. So of course she is giving also new dimension to decolonization, and that is the perspective also the books does something different, because it is also writing from very like Periyar's Dravidian points of Dravidian politics, bringing Dravidian politics and giving it another kinds of nuances. So I have so of course the book is divided into many parts, and you have some of the parts that, so there is a section that, and section on so I'm very much interested in this whole idea of the gossip. So there is a section on that the gossip. So lesson from gossip is called lesson from gossip, that can be almost read as in praise of gossips and what gossip does. And so the way she translated, a scandal quenches his desire, the way he chokes a fire. He is so cruel, he tells me he is leaving, and yet I feel special that he is in love with me. So it's full of love, desire, erotic, many elements that you don't try to see together. Those things are coming together, and I think the text especially have that kind of effect, but also the way we are translated. I remember reading when we are discussing about Kurals, classical Tamil text. Then I remember reading one text by Tiruvalluvar in my school days. And it was about the great saint who was used to pick rice, even when you were eating and rice is falling in, he used to pick those rice from needle. And that was the one thing that I was also thinking for when I was in 4th class, 5th class. Then that story really impacted me in a quite enormous ways. But now getting this book translated in English and doing some kinds of feminist reclamation, doing some kinds of decolonial reclamation is really something very special to us. So thank you, Meena, for doing this work, and congratulations. And of course, tomorrow we are going to have another readings at JMT. JM Teachers Organization is organizing one program in evening, so she will be there. But yeah, so please, now our stage is for you, and please feel free to read.
Thank you to the Dean, Madam, for introducing me, and thanks to Professor Dharmaraj for inviting me to JNU. Just a statement in itself. So the thing is, there is a problem when you write a lot, I think, and one of them is that this was a book that was published last year, and mentally I'm in the next book, which is my collection of poetry, which is released literally 4 or 5 days ago. So what you saw me doing was furiously scribbling notes, because now this looks like someone else wrote it, and I'm like, oh, did I say all this? Okay, that's interesting. So this is a book. Is this a water? Okay, so this is a book that the title of the talk is actually quite interesting, and it kind of is the starting point for how I want to frame both my approach of translating the Tirukural and why I want to claim it, but why I also want to fight with tradition. So the Kural actually I'll come back and start defining what the Kural is, what it means in culture and all of that. But right at the beginning, I just want to frame this talk with this single quote, which goes something like this. So what she says is, would I quarrel? Would I embrace? Would I make love if the light of my lies, the love in my life comes to me? So she's the lover, the female lover in this, is in this very tall position of wondering what she's going to do, because she's endured separation. And I find this entire contrast between at one point she actually wants to have a fight, and at the other point she wants to embrace him. And I find that actually kind of defines my own attitude towards Tamil culture, the language, the literature, the political scene. In one sense, it is a constant quarrel. It is to say, okay, this is misogynist, this is problematic, this you don't accommodate women. On the other hand, this is what I want to take for myself, this is what I want to claim for myself, this is what I want to be identified with. And so this is the origin of the title. So I'm going to read. This is a very long. Perhaps you want me to read the Quran first and then go back to the explanation. Yeah, so I'll read 2 chapters from inside the book of the Quran. So and then I will go into what it took me here, the journey. So the first section I'm reading is called Longing for Sex. உள்ள கழித்தலும் காண மகிழ்தலும் கல்லுக்கில் காமத்திற்கு உண்டு. Not wine, but it is sex that gives sheer delight in thought and such pleasure in sight. No, not even a little millet pout. Total non-sulking is essential when sexual desire overflows and stands as tall as Palmyra. He does not care for me, he does just as he pleases, yet my eyes know no peace, not having seen my man. The next one is quite special because it's addressed to a girlfriend. ஊடற்கண் சென்றேன் மன் தோழி அது மறந்து கூடற்கண் சென்றது என் நெஞ்சு. Petulant, I went to pick a fight, dear girlfriend, but my heart forgot that and ran after him for sex. Hard relate. Like eyes that cannot see, a cold liner when it defines them, I do not see my lover's faults when he is in front of me. When he is with me, I see no faults at all. When we are apart, I see nothing but faults. Like those who dive, aware they will be dragged away, I learnt the futility of anger by fighting with my lover. Like drink that reduces the drunk to objects of ridicule, so does the chest of this charmer. Softer than flowers is making love, few obtain its elegance. Her eyes held tears as she slumped. We hugged, trembling with desire, her haste surpassed mine. And this is another part of, as Professor Dharmaraj pointed out, part of the agenda was to not just reclaim the text, not just to do something which I felt was, doing justice to the poetry of the Quran, but also to just give space to the female desire that existed in the text. And I'll come to that shortly. So I'm going to read something called A Lament of the Lovesick. I would, if only I could, hide this love sickness. If someone draws, it surges forth like a gushing spring. No, I cannot conceal it. No, I cannot explain this disease to the man who causes it. It is shameful. My life is torn between lust and shame, and this my frail body cannot bear. My desire is an endless sea. There is no raft to swim across safely. What would be the fate of his enemies, I wonder, when he unleashes so much suffering on his friends? Sex, its pleasure, a wordless word, a sea, its path leading to a pain even more immense. And this is even better in Tamil. Kama kadumbural nindi karai kanen yamathum yane ulen. I swim the rough seas of sexual desire. I see no shore. In the dead of night, I am alone. She lulls all life on this land to sleep. Kindest night, she has no one but me to keep her company. Crueler than my cruel one's atrocities, these late night hours dragging on painfully. If, like my heart, these eyes too could travel the inner way, they would not have to swim in such flooded waters. So all of this is the thirst portion of the poetry. And then we come to maybe I'll read this at the end, so I just get on with the talk. So, forgive me if it's a little bit textual because I didn't have the time to do something much more spontaneous, but I think you're used to lectures in the JNU, so. Yeah. Okay, one of the world's oldest surviving languages, Tamil is spoken by about 78 million people in the southern Indian states of Tamil Nadu and Puducherry, Iram and elsewhere globally. Modern linguistic scholarship places the oldest extant Tamil literature at around 300 BCE. Reflective of the Tamil philosophy of life, the Tirukural, composed in the 1st century BCE, is the most vital text of this ancient civilization, a heartbeat to its culture and imagination. Authored by Thiruvalluvar, no biographical details of the poet remain. Anonymity does not mean obscurity. This is a poet who remains central to our everyday lives. Recognizing him as the greatest Tamil icon, the state of Tamil Nadu officially follows a Tamil calendar that begins in the year 31 BCE, believed to be the year of Thiruvalluvar's birth. In his memory we keep time, through his poetry we navigate our world. So the Tirukural consists of 1,333 verses. Each chapter has 10 verses, so it's 133 chapters, divided into 3 sections: morality, materialism, and desire. Written in the Kural Venbar, each Kural runs into 2 lines. The first consists of 4 feet and the second of 3. The third section, the Imbattupal, the Book of Desire, or the Kamattupal, translated here, consists of 250 Kurals divided into 25 chapters. The first translation of the Tirukural in English appeared more than 220 years ago, in 1794. It remains one of the most widely translated non-religious texts. In the intervening years, more than 100 translations have appeared in English. Here I've attempted the first feminist interventionist translation into English, remaining true to the female and male desire throbbing through the lifeblood of this text. And then there's this is kind of, background, history, whatever you call it. And then I want to go into how do I place myself in this text and how does that inform the work that I do. And that is the Kural that opens the Book of Desire. Anandakol Aimail Kollo. What does that mean? It describes the first encounter with the heroine. Dazzled, the hero wonders if this woman is a fearsome goddess. When she faces off with him in the second Kural, he feels that she is brought along a shock troop of terrifying goddesses. By the third Kural, he confesses that he, who has never known death, now realizes that death wages war with a woman's beautiful eyes. In a later Kural, her eyes devour lives. Fatally attractive, she strikes fear and terror in her beholder, arresting their attention. This deadly, intoxicating woman, the Tirukural, is a Tamil woman. She might be a universal stand-in for the beloved, but she was conceived in the Tamil universe. When the hero encounters this Tamil woman, he is awestruck, almost afraid of the power she holds. How does the reader encounter this Tamil woman? Not face to face, as in a physical or imagined encounter, but in the realm of ideas, where her beauty is dismissed as a distraction. Hi. I think the little music is good, but does this fear-inducing Tamil beauty have the right to comment about the text in which she appears and holds court? Does this woman ever exist outside the text? I ask these questions because that terrifying Tamil goddess is absent. Absent as a translator, absent as a commentator, absent as a philosopher of love, absent as an aesthetic spokesperson. Isn't this absence of women, as translators, as commentators, a product of marginalization and masculine insecurity, and a gatekeeping in the world of literature? Or Is her silence a confirmation of the fact that women writers have been reduced to their subjective positions, forced by patriarchy into shunning the universal while flaunting a preference for the granular world of the particular? Will she, in her paratextual incarnation, strike terror? In this intellectual encounter, is she seductive, striking, or both? And does this eventually lead to love? Here on the pages of this book, I claim for myself the space to interpret the Tamil women in the Tirukural. As a woman in love, I also claim the space to be her. This is the recursive loop. And then this also comes to the question of why did I have to explain what I was doing? I mean, like, the poetry that you just heard stands fine on its own. It can be read by anybody without having to understand any of the historical background, because, it's, let's say, a little bit like grooming. You put it on a t-shirt, you can put it on Twitter, you put it as an inspiring Instagram quote, it travels. There's no question of traveling. So why this extra additional burden? What do I think as I sit down to write this introduction? I started translating the love poetry of the Tirukural on 23rd April 2012, a full decade ago. There was nothing rushed about this project. I came to it again and again, layering up the meaning where it felt necessary, paring it down to the bare bones. I feel awkward and torn. The Book of Desire is pure love poetry. My every impulse says to leave the lovers alone, to let them live in their own world. The poetry is enough. It has withstood the test of time, and with any luck, its beauty will continue to be exchanged between lovers across languages, across cultures and continents. Why then do I write this introduction or this political framing of the text, even as I am disturbed by the incongruence of the attempt? Do not ruin the romance I remind myself. I have read these verses over and over again, and there's a part of me which feels that no one needs to know anything about Tamil at all, about its antiquity or beauty, about its history of resistance or renaissance, to appreciate the human drama. There's also the Tamil woman in me who thinks, this is the universe I know, the one into which I was born, in which I have been loved, learned to love, and have been through heartbreak. What if my universe is singular, exceptional, and different from others? This is a facet of life that I have encountered often, never wanting to be exoticized, but aware that in other lands I am a stranger nonetheless. So what is? So historically, and this is the flavor of the month, decolonization. Yeah. Colonialism was the first rupture of the continuous, unbroken tradition of the Tamil language, status and usage within Tamil civilization. In addition to their territorial contiguity, the Tamil states preserved their linguistic originality. So what happened is that Tamil people as a rule had Tamil as the language of the state, science, art or literature, as opposed to other parts of India where the official language was either Persian, one of the Prakrits, or Sanskrit, which was unknown to the majority of people. People were being governed by the language they spoke. Today, the Tamil language and its people are seen as a bulwark in resisting the communal and religious divides that have engulfed the entire Indian subcontinent. These histories gain tremendous importance. And this is where I think it's very interesting that, I want to place this text and talk about it. So Tirukural as a text belongs to the lineage of Sangha poetry, authored by Thiruvalluvar. The text maintains opacity, giving away nothing about its author. The Tirukural has occupied a honored place in the Tamil literary canon, with quotations used verbatim or alluded to in classic epics such as the Silappadigaram, 5th century, the Manimegalai, 6th century, and the Kamba Ramayana, written between the 9th and 12th century. More commentaries have been written on the Tirukural than on any other Tamil text. The 10 most important medieval commentators, all male, are remembered through a standalone anonymous verse, and only 5 of their commentaries are available in full today. So here I want to go into what is a Kural, which I already said to you, it's a poem of 2 lines. And even as I wax eloquent about the Tamil language and the Tirukural, some more ground needs to be covered. And this is like stating the obvious. How did the Tirukural survive all these years? If this text is a living text today, we owe an ongoing debt for its intergenerational transmission over thousands of years To every scribe who copied it onto palm leaf manuscripts, every publisher who keeps the Tirukkural in print, every translator, commentator, enterprising spirit who renders it as a pocket-sized app, a book or an app, every elder who gives the books to newly married couples at weddings, to over-enthusiastic Tamil teachers who make students learn it every day and recite it in the morning assembly, to a High Court judge who ruled that it should be mandatory on the school syllabus. As a text so much in contemporary usage, quoted so often, taught across the state, painted inside government buses, with Tamil television channels airing 5-minute commentary on a Kural every morning, one could easily forget how the Tirukkural was handed down through the ages. So there's a little bit of print history that's very interesting, because the first printing of the book happened in 1812 by Thanjai Gnanaprakasam, and in the pre-modern times it survived in the form of palm leaf manuscripts. So I'm going to jump a little bit from my narrative, because it's quite interesting, because a lot of Tamil palm leaf manuscripts were systematically destroyed by the process of Sanskritization, Aryanization. I write about it, please do check it out. So Tamil people, partly owing to ignorance, like people were like, what are these leaves doing in our home? Partly because of conditions of, you couldn't preserve this for over a couple of decades, or at the most 100 years, but also owing to superstitions where if you throw this away, you were supposed to get, some benefit in the next birth. Or some were even consigned to water or burnt as firewood. So it's a very interesting thing. So, but this is not just about the Tirupal. It's such an interesting thing that this book survived. But I want to read a little bit in kind of saying that how many Tamil texts were lost. And I'm just going to read a very small portion here. I got my hands on a 300-page book published in 1959, Marandu Pona Tamil Nootkal, translated as Tamil texts that have disappeared, by the scholar Mailaisini Venkatasamy. So Venkatasamy begins his preface with a tragic episode. He doesn't have children, and so he adopts 2 children, and they also die tragically young. So in seeking consolation, he immerses himself trying to read a commentary of 11th century grammatical treatise. In the course of reading, so he's reading 11th century book, and he tries to find out all the books that have been cited by this particular 11th century book, and he realizes they are missing. So with the death of his 2 children fresh in his mind, he imagines every forgotten book as a child, irretrievably lost by Mother Tamil, and begins to collect details of the text. So his story reminds me of the fictional experiments of Bolaño and Borges, except that this was painfully real. So he collects this list of cross-cited Tamil texts that have been lost, including their titles and whatever information or excerpts were available, and it notes more than 100 literary texts, including 50 books of love poetry, war poetry, and epics, 45 commentaries on Tamil grammar and linguistics, 34 texts of Tamil drama, and all of this is until 1959. So this is quite interesting in terms of the loss, and also here, it's very important about the kind of revivalist work that was done by people like U.V. Swaminathan Iyer, who went in search of these palm leaf manuscripts. And also we have natural calamity, natural causes, militant Brahmin Hinduism, religious hatred, people superstitiously throwing away manuscripts into the rivers, the children of Tamil scholars not realizing the value of knowledge contained in this, and custodians of these manuscripts in temple feeding them into the fire as part of Brahminical rituals. Where these works escaped such organized destruction, their contents were mercilessly mauled. So you have a British folklorist and one of the early translators of the Tirukkural who writes in 1871, "It's almost impossible now to obtain a printed copy of any early Tamil book that has not been systematically corrupted and mutilated to meet the views of those whose livelihood depends on the rejection by the public of Dravidian literature and in acceptance of the Puranic legends." And this is I think possibly the most polite way in which you can call out Sanatana Dharma without getting into trouble. But this man keeps writing, and so I have another excerpt from Goa a few pages later. He's lost all the English reserve, and then he says, "The Brahmins corrupted what they could not destroy. The editing of all books gradually fell to them because they alone had the leisure and knowledge that literary labor required. This process was continued till it became almost impossible to discover the original. The only copies that I have been able to purchase are as obscure and overloaded with Puranic superstition as the legend of any pagoda. The same thing has occurred with all the best Dravidian poetry. And again, this is really interesting in terms of how these texts survived. And I think this is a German priest who comes to the south. I think one of the Dutch colonies, and he's trying to collect all the Tamil texts and he's trying to archive them and already make like so we don't have any of the books that he collected, but what we have is what you call the bibliography, the list that he made, the books that he has, and these books are like so not sold, or like, and it became a collector's thing, right? Like they wanted to collect the Vedas and take it to Europe, so they were also trying to get these ancient texts and they would take it to Europe where nobody was translating them, nobody was reading them, so all of this knowledge was also in that sense lost in this way. And part of this was and at some point he writes of how difficult it is to buy, and then he manages to buy it on the sly from Brahmin widows, because these women were like, at some point still outcast by society, but still had access to what was there. So I'm going to shift gear a little bit, and I'll also talk about why speak of caste in a book that speaks of love. Why speak of caste in a book that rejects the inequality of birth, declaring Pirapokkum Yella Uyirkum, all lives are equal by birth? Caste has become embedded in the history of our literature and in the story of our lives. Let me bring you another palm leaf episode, another slice of history demonstrating how Brahmanism, hiding in the guise of Hinduism, fought against the Tamil language. The Dikshidhars of Chidambaram are a Brahmin caste that hereditary control the Nataraja temple to this day, refusing to divulge temple accounts even to state authorities. In the 10th century, they refused to part with palm leaf manuscripts of Tamil hymns kept locked away in the temple chambers, even though the demand came from King Rajaraja Choran. You all seen poems also. They argued that unless the four legendary long-dead Tamil scholars, Appar, Samandar, Sundarar and Manikyavasagar, came together with the king and demanded the palm leaf manuscripts, the Brahmin custodians of the temple would not give them up. Rajaraja Choran was unfazed. He made life-size golden icons of the scholars, brought them in a procession to the temple, and demanded the release of the manuscripts. It's interesting to think of the conceit here. What if the Dikshitars had refused on the grounds that statues were artificial rather than alive? I like to think that if they had, Rajaraja Choran would have done the same to the Nataraja statue, the temple's own object of worship. As it was, the Brahmins were forced to buckle under the pressure of a mighty state, and the manuscripts were retrieved. We might have come a long way since the 10th century, but not the Dikshitars, who maintained the temple in a chokehold of anti-Tamil hatred and Brahminical superiority. Even today, the Dikshitars there do not allow prayers in the Tamil language, something that has been the subject of a long-running litigation. Jayashila, a Dalit woman who attempted to offer prayers in Tamil, was assaulted by these Dikshitar priests just a few months ago. Incidents like this undermine claims that the Sanskrit-Tamil divide is something that belongs to the haunted past. And then, so I come to the section where which Brahma Prakash actually read, but I still want to read this because if we have seen this kind of systematic incursion, destruction, mutilation, and inferiorization, subjugation of a culture, what is it that prevents us from calling it also as colonialism? Is it because some people are not white-skinned that we don't use the word colonialism for them? So if translation has to be a decolonial practice, it also calls for us to widen the scope of what colonialism is and what it involves. Colonialism, to me, is not just white-skinned European hegemony. Colonialism is subjugation and supremacy. Colonialism is the inflated superiority of claiming to be a better civilization. Colonialism is the imposition of another set of cultural values. Colonialism is the restructuring of a society based on the hierarchies prevalent in the colonizer's own. In this context, colonialism is, to me, is the inroads made by the patriarchal caste system into Tamil culture and society. Colonialism is erasure and appropriation. Colonialism is the attempt to subsume Sanskrit and Sanatana Dharma, the hierarchical social order of inequality based on caste and misogyny, have been one of the chief colonizers where Tamil people are concerned. Hindi, supported by right-wing Hindu nationalism, is another. British, Dutch, French colonialism are also actors, but they are not the only ones who meddled in the lives of my people. Colonialism is thus a violent project of caste and misogyny being forced down the throat of another civilization by overt and covert means, one which does not get the same attention as British colonialism or other such offensive campaigns of oppression unleashed by white people. Because I see translation as a radical and transformative act of political intervention, I shoulder the burden of calling out these colonizers also. I do not believe that just because we are all brown folk, just because we've all been colonized by the British, we ought to maintain a culture of silence and soft peddling about these violent histories within our own traditions. Framing translation as a dynamic dismantling of colonial traditions, I'm not going to remain tight-lipped just because one colonizer shares the color of my skin and the other does not. Decolonization for me is not a blind turn to indigeneity, because what indigeneity are we talking about? If we exorcise the ghosts of British colonialism, are we content with the de facto second-class status with Tamil being referred to as a Niche Bhasha, a low language, by the Brahmanical class, forbidden from being used in worship in temples all over Tamil Nadu? If colonialism is erasure, we need to wonder who caused the first disappearance of Tamil texts and consequently Tamil history. Answering this question will reveal who the earliest colonial power upon my people was. And then I want to come very much to, I'm going to wind down just a little bit, give me another 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
We have time.
We have time? Okay, so I want to come very much to the particular Tamil political context. So, and why this text became like, it was taken up, like the Tirukural was taken up as like, okay, you have the Manusmriti, we have the Tirukural, like if that's the text of your civilization, this is the text of our civilization. It just became that really central text. And of course, what's interesting here, and what I may or may not read, is that there are very good grounds for why it was taken up, but even those who took up this text do not highlight the fact that female desire is so important to this text. The fact that it's such a liberating text where women's sexuality is concerned, where expression of love is concerned, with the fact that, it is such a radical core of the text, but for those political purposes of opposing Sanatana, they would talk about other things. It's easier to talk about Pirapokkum Ellavirkum as opposed to saying Kankalan Kollum Sirinokum Kamatin Sembagam and Peridi. You don't want to talk about stolen love, you don't want to talk about clandestine love, you don't want to talk about all of this desire that's right there in this book. Because, the best intentioned Tamil uncles also happen to be somewhat conservative. So, the fault lines that run through society are the fault lines that we see in scholarship, as verbose and pedantic as a text might be. As much as it's supported by a complex web of cross-citation, it nevertheless betrays loyalty to its author's own caste, class, clan, and race. So what you see is that, in some places you find that people are comparing the text with the Bhagavad Gita, or just knuckles, but inevitable comparisons. And there's this other guy called, this 13th century commentator, Parimal Aragar, whose influence is massive, casts the longest shadow. And his name, of course, is a very interesting name. Parimal Aragar means the handsome man on the horse. You can give him that. So what he does is that he has been routinely called out for constructing the meaning of the Tirukural in conformity with orthodox Brahmanical ideology. Whereas in the view of the Dravidians, Tirukural documents the cultural attainments of an early Tamil civilization that was free of many of the oppressive features of Indo-Aryan civilization such as caste. So what is quite interesting here is that these men who are saying that, Parimal Aragar is introducing, or he's trying to get into the text and try to transform it as, supportive of the caste system or reflective of the caste system through his commentary. He can't meddle with the original text. But they don't talk about the amount of misogynist in-readings or inroads or, what you call meddling that he's done with the text. So for instance, Valluva writes something and in the commentary he writes, chastity which is dearer than life. But it's not there. Where did you come up with this? So that's kind of where, so here I wanted to say that one of the persons who took up this text and wanted to use Tamil literature as a vehicle to assert, define, and safeguard Tamil identity. That was Periyar. So what he says in 1949, he says, Kural is a text that refutes Manusmriti, it's a text that opposes Aryan supremacy, it's a text that rings the death knell for Brahminism, and it's very necessary to spread the message of the Tirukkural. And here I'm like, okay, because obviously the basis or the heart of the book is that couplet that says, Pirapukkum ella uirkum, that all beings are the same in birth, which kind of runs counter to Sanatana Dharma's assertion that we are all born into a hierarchy of superiority and inferiority. But I want to say there are three particular reasons why I personally found Tirukkural is a counter to what's being imposed on us and what we are trying to resist. So, since we are accustomed to comparing secular Tamil text with the Brahmanical Sanskrit counterparts, my first caveat is that control of women, the classic paradigm of Sanatana Dharma, forms no part of the Tirukkural. And this is actually a big issue for me as a feminist, because people, like, when you fight Sanatana Dharma, you're really foregrounding caste all the time, and you're forgetting that 50% of the people in this country, the women of this country, are absolutely subjugated by whatever, magic potion that is, So I wanted to, as a feminist, I wanted to cite Kurals 57. Sirai kakkum kaappu evan seyyum magalar nirai kakkum kaappe thalai. And what that means, what's the point of prison-like vigilance? A woman protecting herself is the greatest safety. So firstly, unlike the Brahmanical text, the Tirukkural did not arise in a society that engaged in child marriage, where women were sequestered and given in matrimony before they even hit puberty to ensure that their virginity and chastity was proven to the in-laws. Neither does it reflect the Manusmriti, the supposedly divine text, which declares that all women are seductresses of whom even their fathers should be wary. While the control of women is the heartbeat of Sanatana Dharma, the Hindu social order, nowhere does the Tirukkural call for any woman to be controlled. A woman is not someone to be imprisoned, all her movements watched over. Instead, she is entrusted with the task of her own protection. It is her autonomy that protects her, not the lack of it. And secondly, unlike the Brahmanical Hindu marriage, which unites the husband and wife for 7 lives, or the concept of pativrata, loyalty to the husband for eternity, the Tirukkural suggests that incompatibility can be fatal. This Kural 890, Udambadu illadavar vaalkai kudangarul pambodu udanuvaindatru. In Pope's translation, domestic life with those who don't agree is dwelling in a shed with a snake for company. As a victim of domestic violence, I've lived through what this means. The poison of cohabiting once irreconcilable differences set in leaves no option other than certain death of oneself, of one's identity. Valluvar calls out the toxicity of such an arrangement in stark opposition to the Sanatana Dharma, where marriage is for life. And thirdly, for all my misgivings over the text, I want to fundamentally distinguish between the way the Tirukkural looks at the 3 parts of the Tirukkural. So there's the chapter on morality, there's the chapter on materialism, but the third, which is love poetry. Given the underlying fact that the institution of the family is of ultimate importance to the institutional state, the first 2 sections demonstrate adherence to the structure of a household, the role of husband and wife. The third part does not suffer these notions. Thiruvalluvar might have been writing all these for his side chick. So it is a world that 2 lovers conjure together. Gossip and social censure do not interfere with the sexual passion. Instead, they feed its flames. Society does not separate the lovers. It exists outside of them. Love and sex are acts of equality and democracy. Without any inherent hierarchy, they're available to everyone. And these were the reasons that kind of led me to what I have done. And here I also want to say that. How much time do I have? 5-10 minutes?
10.
10 minutes, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to say one bit on my own translation, and then I would like to say on 2 or 3 usages that I have, how I try to make it feminist. So my translation progressed in much the same manner that Tamil commentators of the Tirukkural have traditionally approached the work. First, through the semantic breakdown of the text component words to explain its meaning, a process called Pada-Urai. So you basically take every single word and find out what it means. Referring back to the earliest commentators, the word themselves were extrapolated and tinged with regressive patriarchal meanings and interpretations. For instance, in Kural Parimel Laragar, I told you earlier, right? He adds the contentious commentary that the woman is losing shame, which is dearer than life. Shocking, because nowhere does Valluva write that shame is dearer than life. Well, this is a good example of the impositions and infiltration of patriarchal ideas into the text. This is still an introduction, it's not a dissertation, so I'm not going to give you every single a single thing. So what I have tried to do is that I have also, so what I have seen is that Parimiraraga is a known offender. He has been taken to task by Tamil scholars for smuggling several concepts of the Brahmanical social order into the text. They have not singled him out for foisting onto it a patriarchal outlook via his overemphasis on chastity, shame, and generalized misogyny. Instead of rejecting these constructs outright, Tamil male scholars seem to have accepted them as a given, something foundational to every society. This is an injustice that needs to be undone. So before I embarked on my own rendering, I took the time to pause and to observe how judgmental values of reserve, Victorian morality, Brahmanical patriarchy, and rigid notions of masculine and feminine value systems have impregnated the existing translations. Like a circuit breaker, this essential step ensured that the burdens did not carry over to my own translation, either subconsciously or because of deep-rooted conditioning. So I have many very interesting anecdotes here. So you either have Christian missionaries translating the text, Hindu social reformers translating the text, and you have words that come like union. No, not trade union, it's the other thing, the other union. They have words like Congress again, not the International Congress. So people have been like, they're so polite, they're just literally dancing around, so just saying the word sex, it's far less easier that way. So you have to go read the book for all these little tidbits. So here I want to say that there's something else that's wrong with the publication of the book in the Tirukural, because when you open this book, 25 chapters, they're divided into something in every Tamil book available, which is called the Kalaviyal, the first 7 chapters, and the Karpiyal. So the Kalaviyal is that, what they call the clandestine meeting of the lovers, and Karpu is the chaste wedded love. And the funny thing is that there's nothing inside the text, inside the Kurals, to suggest that this is married people talking to each other, and this is dating lovers talking to each other, this is people who met on Tinder talking to each other. You just want to make the difference. These are lovers. It doesn't matter in what state they are or how they met. So what I have tried to do is that I have renounced having this framing, because what is equally true is that this translation comes into being in a society where women continue to inhabit a shaming culture, where offhand divisions of premarital or clandestine love versus married love feed damaging stereotypes. So I encourage everyone not to be encumbered by these internal divisions of the text. So I also want to finally do this very interesting thing. I would like to remind everyone that as much as the Tirukural stands in opposition to Brahmanical Sanskrit texts which perpetuate ideas of birth-based inequality, it also stands in opposition to them through its celebration of female desire. Unlike texts that condemn women's desire, the Tirukural presents it with no holds barred, especially notable when we compare the book to Manusmriti's misogynist scaremongering, or the Hindu epic Ramayana, which a lot of people will condense and tell you that women's desire is at the root of all evil. And some of the other things are I think I've done a couple of things wherever possible, and there's no mention of wife in the book. Sorry guys, because I couldn't find it in the translation. I couldn't find it in the original. There's only one, in all the 250 I found one word that could be husband, Konkan, but I've translated that as lover. Broadening the Venn diagram, if there is one. And then I also tried to see that what's very interesting is that these lines are okay, sometimes you may know it's a woman being described, but you don't know if it's a man describing a woman. We assume it's always the gender binary, but it could as well be a girl describing another girl, a woman describing another woman. And when, there's a lot of thing where the women's describing how much she misses the man, but it could also be equally a man is describing how much he misses his lover. So, and because this is not marked in the text, it's just assumed, and it's been assumed for all these years, these are very clear gender binaries. I have like, okay, I invite people to read this with the idea that it could be anybody, just like the text doesn't impose something, so we don't have to impose anything on that. So this is something else. And the second thing is, in terms of the word chastity, does Thiruvalur actually use the word chastity anywhere? And so I had to do a little bit of digging, which I think is maybe if there's anybody who's a Tamil speaker here, it could be quite interesting. So what he does somewhere is that he writes, Kama kanichi udaikum nirai ennum naanathal veertha kadavu. So what he is trying to say, so nirai is the word everybody is saying that, okay, this is nirai ennum, nirai is what is bolting my, so okay, basically it says, love will break the door that's bolted with my nirai or my chastity. But chastity is not what the original text intends, and so to use it as an imposition of a post-dated cultural values on a classical text. So I wanted to avoid the burden of regressive ideas because I don't think nirai actually had to mean that. So I went back and looked at what does nirai mean. And nirai means fullness, right? Just the word nirai, like nirai mai means something is really absolutely full. Like, you know, if you say kodam naranjirukku, is that pot is full. So it reflects the state of fullness, and that does not anyway mean that it means chastity. So what I did is when my turn came to translate this word nirai in the Kural, I chose unwavering mind. After all, nirai means fullness, strength, and containment. And I wanted my translation to incorporate a sense of self-fulfillment, of something that does not have to wander or waver, to challenge the lazy patriarchal notion that women have fickle minds, you know, just to say that it's my unwavering mind, you know. And the second thing also for me was very interesting because like its close cousin virginity, chastity, upon which most translators have fallen back, denotes something physical. The classification of relationships as chaste or unchaste, implying something situated in the woman's body. But the heroine here, who's caught in this whirlpool of passion, a battle axe that breaks through her, and as much as it's a metaphor, it's also got a mental state of being. So I was like, no, you're not going to make this a physical thing. I mean, if she's in the state of nirai, for me it's this mental state in which she doesn't want to, you know, let anything inside, or, you know, she's unwavering. And what I've also done is, yeah, I told you about the husband-wife things. And then I was like, okay, so after doing all of this, I also wanted to, told you, make the text a little bit more gender fluid. I mean, I didn't take Vallur's permission, don't have his email address, but what I did was, when I was reading some of the books, I find that, so there's another, again, somewhere this word, like nirai, there's another word called nirmai. And nirma is often used they have talked about nirma as essential quality. And for me, nirma, I did not want to make it into just, you know, a quality, but I wanted to make it as liquidity or fluidity. So the Kural, kannirainda karigai kampetul pedaikku pennirainda nirmai perigu. So everybody would be, you know, translating this as like she's full of femininity, but for me it's not about that. So it is like sleek boned like bamboo, this young woman is a beauty to behold. The most remarkable is her feminine fluidity, to kind of say that, you know, it's not something she inhabits, but it's something that she, you know, passes through. And I also think that, you know, words can be occupied in service of broader and more inclusive politics. And so there's something very interesting that comes very much towards the end that says the girl or woman or man is fighting with the lover. This lover is markedly male. Says, Penniyala ellarum kannin pudu unbar nannen parathanin marbu. So what it says is, Penniyala ellarum, it's always translated as all women. Because the word is pen, the word with this pen is women. But the words Penniyala ellarum are slightly more complexly constructed in the Tamil, and it brings the meaning closer to everyone who is women-like. It does not say Pengal ellarum, it says Penniyala ellarum, everyone who is women-like or feminine. So I translated it as everyone with womanness publicly feast their eyes, but I will not embrace your debauched chest. So here the beholders are not people of a particular gender, but people of a particular inclination. And for me it's important to bear in mind that as a radical act of social transformation, translation can accommodate a world outside strictly defined gender roles. while it may not amount to much, knowing that you can negotiate space for an inclusive world, especially in the world of love and while staying true to the original text, is something that's deeply gratifying to me. So I'm going to finish this by saying the act of translating the love poetry of the Kurals has reinforced my belief that we need to weaponize the words we choose. And in taking up this translation as interpretation, I have tried to recast translation as an act of feminist commentary, of reclaiming female desire, out of urgent, necessary subversion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meena. Like to